The great hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Hundreds of species sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the small figure standing at the center of the chamber. Ambassador Velrath of the Kirashi Collective was shaking. Her forearms hung at her sides and her silver skin had turned pale with fear. She had traveled for 6 days to reach this place, 6 days without sleep, 6 days filled with nightmares of what she had left behind. "They have returned," she said. Her voice echoed through the massive room. "The devourer swarm has returned." A wave of whispers spread through the council. Some species gasped. Others leaned forward in their seats, unable to believe what they had just heard. The devourer swarm was supposed to be gone. 300 years ago, a great alliance had pushed them to the edge of the galaxy. Everyone believed they had died out there in the cold dark between stars. Everyone was wrong. "Two of our outer colonies have already fallen," Velrath continued. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Billions of my people are dead. The swarm consumed everything. They ate the buildings. They ate the ships. They ate—" She stopped and closed her eyes. "They ate everyone." The council leader, an ancient creature with blue scales and tired eyes, raised one hand. "How many ships does the swarm have?" Velrath opened her eyes. "Our scanners counted over 2 million drone ships before they went dark. But the swarm is growing. Every world they consume gives them more material to build more drones. By the time they reach our homeworld, there could be 10 million, 20 million. We do not know." The whispers grew louder. 2 million ships was already a number beyond imagination. Most species in the council had navies of a few thousand vessels at most. Even the great empires could not field more than 50,000. "We cannot fight them alone," Velrath said. She turned slowly, looking at each section of the council. "We need help. We need the combined strength of every species in this room. We need—" She paused and turned to face one particular section of seats. "We need the humans." All eyes moved to the human delegation. They sat in a small section near the back of the hall. There were only 3 of them, which had always seemed strange to other species. Humanity controlled over 200 worlds and had the largest military fleet in known space, yet they only sent 3 representatives to the council. The woman in the center of the human group stood up. Her name was Director Chen, and she was the head of the human delegation. She was not tall, and she was not young. Her hair was gray, and her face had many lines, but her eyes were sharp and calm. "Ambassador Velrath," Director Chen said, "please tell us more about the swarm's movement patterns. How fast are they traveling? What is their heading?" Velrath felt a small spark of hope. The humans were asking questions. That meant they were interested. That meant they might help. "They are moving at 0.7 light speed between jumps," she answered. "Their heading is directly toward our homeworld. At their current pace, they will arrive in the 12 standard days." Director Chen nodded slowly. She picked up a small device from her table and looked at it for a moment. Then she typed something with her fingers. The whole room watched her in silence. "I have sent a message to Earth Command," she said finally. "Help is on the way." The council chamber erupted in relief. Species that had been holding their breath finally let it out. Some even cheered. The humans were going to help. The legendary human fleet would come and save the Kirashi. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the human military. They had all seen the recordings from the Terran-Dominion War 20 years ago. The Dominion had been the largest empire in the galaxy at that time. They had attacked human colonies without warning, killing millions. They had expected the young human species to surrender quickly. Instead, the humans had launched a counterattack that shocked everyone. Thousands of human warships had appeared from nowhere. They moved together like a single organism, striking at the Dominion's weak points with perfect timing. In just 1 year, the humans had destroyed the Dominion completely. Not defeated, destroyed. The Dominion no longer existed. After that war, every species in the galaxy understood one thing: do not make enemies with the humans. Velrath walked toward Director Chen with tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much. How many ships are you sending? When will they arrive?" Director Chen's expression did not change. "The ship will arrive within 3 days. It will contact you directly." Velrath blinked. "Ship? Do you mean ships?" "No," Director Chen said simply. "Ship. Singular. One vessel." The relief in the chamber died instantly. Velrath stared at the human woman, certain she had heard wrong. One ship, she repeated, against millions of swarm drones? That is correct. Velrath's four hands clenched into fists. Director Chen, with respect, I do not think you understand the situation. The Devourer swarm has millions of ships. They destroyed 2 colonies in less than a week. They killed billions of my people. And you are sending one ship? Director Chen looked at Velrath with those calm, unreadable eyes. I understand the situation perfectly, Ambassador. One ship is what we are sending. One ship is what you need. But our fleet is not needed for this. Director Chen sat back down in her seat. The vessel we are sending is more than capable of handling the swarm. You have our word. Velrath stood there, unable to speak. She looked around the council chamber for support. But the other species seemed just as confused as she was. Some looked angry. Others looked disappointed. A few were already whispering that the humans had abandoned the Karashi. Director Chen, the council leader, spoke up. Perhaps you could explain your reasoning. The Karashi are asking for significant military support. Why are you sending only one vessel? Director Chen smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that everyone else did not. Because one vessel is enough, she said. You will understand when it arrives. And with that, she went silent. No matter how many questions the council asked, Director Chen would say nothing more. The humans had made their decision. As Velrath left the council chamber that night, she felt a cold weight in her chest. She had come here hoping for salvation. She had dreamed of a great human fleet darkening the stars around her homeworld. Instead, she was returning with the promise of a single ship. Her people were going to die. She was certain of it. The humans had either gone mad, or they simply did not care enough to help properly. Either way, the Karashi were doomed. She just did not know yet how wrong she was. 3 days passed like 3 years. Ambassador Velrath stood on the observation deck of the Karashi Central Command Station, watching the stars through a massive window of reinforced glass. Behind her, dozens of officers worked at their stations, tracking the approach of the swarm. The enemy was now only 9 days away. Every hour, the long-range sensors showed more drone ships joining the horde. The current count was 3.2 million. Velrath had not slept since she returned from the council. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the dead. She saw the colonies burning. She saw the swarm descending like a black cloud, consuming everything in its path. Ambassador, a voice called from behind her. We are detecting a ship coming out of faster-than-light travel. It matches human energy signatures. Velrath turned around quickly. Put it on the main screen. The great window flickered and transformed into a display showing the space near the station. A bright flash of light appeared, and then a ship emerged from nothing. Velrath's heart sank. It was small. Compared to Karashi warships, it was barely larger than a heavy cruiser. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with sharp angles and flat surfaces. There were no decorations, no colors, no symbols except for a simple name painted on the side in white letters. HSS Consequence. That is it? Admiral Thornax walked up beside Velrath, his voice filled with disbelief. That is what the humans sent? It appears so, Velrath said quietly. This is an insult. Thornax slammed one of his 4 fists against the wall. We asked for a fleet. We begged for a fleet. We showed them the numbers. We told them about the millions of enemy ships. And they send this thing? Other officers gathered around, staring at the screen. Their faces showed the same mixture of anger and despair that Velrath felt in her chest. Perhaps there are more coming? One young officer suggested hopefully. Scan the area, Thornax ordered. Look for other ships. The scanning officer worked his controls for several moments. Then he shook his head. There is nothing else, Admiral. The human vessel is alone. The silence that followed was heavy and bitter. Velrath stepped forward and pressed the communication button. Her voice trembled with barely controlled emotion as she spoke. Human vessel, this is Ambassador Velrath of the Karashi Collective. We were promised aid. We were promised military support against the Devourer swarm. Where is your fleet? There was a pause. Static crackled through the speakers. Then a voice came through, male, calm, and surprisingly relaxed. Ambassador Velrath, this is Captain Marcus Webb of the HSS Consequence. It is nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. As for your question, you are looking at the fleet. Velrath felt something cold spread through her chest. Captain Webb, I do not think you understand. The swarm has over 3 million ships. They will be here in 9 days. We need serious military support. Not a single cruiser. Oh, I understand perfectly, Ambassador. I have read all the reports. 3.2 million drones, 14 queen nodes, silicon-based life forms with a hive mind structure. The captain's voice remained casual, almost cheerful. Honestly, I have seen worse. Admiral Thornax grabbed the communication device from Velrath's hand. Listen to me, human. My people are facing extinction. This is not a game. If you are not going to help us properly, then leave. We do not need false hope. Admiral, I understand your frustration. Really, I do. Captain Webb's voice did not change. He did not sound angry or offended. But I am not here to give you false hope. I am here to solve your problem. Now, if you want my help, I am going to need all the data you have on the swarm. Scanning reports, movement patterns, communication frequencies, everything. Thornax laughed bitterly. And what will you do with that information? Fight 3 million ships by yourself? Yes. The simple answer hung in the air. No one spoke. Captain Webb, Velrath took the communication device back. With respect, what you are suggesting is impossible. No single ship, no matter how advanced, can defeat a force of that size. You will die, and then we will die. How is that helpful? Ambassador, I am not going to lie to you. I cannot explain everything right now. But I need you to trust me. For the first time, the captain's voice became serious. Humanity did not send me here to watch you die. We sent one ship because one ship is all we need. The Consequence was built for exactly this kind of situation. What kind of situation? The impossible kind. Velrath looked at Admiral Thornax. The old warrior's face was hard and angry, but she could see something else in his eyes. A tiny spark of curiosity. We have no other options, Velrath said quietly. Our own fleet has fewer than 8,000 ships. Even with everything we have, we cannot fight the swarm. Thornax was silent for a long moment. Then he let out a heavy breath. Fine. We will give the human what he wants. Send him all our data. He turned and walked away, his voice dropping to a mutter. If we are going to die, at least we will die knowing we tried everything. Velrath transmitted the order. Within minutes, all of their intelligence on the swarm was sent to the human ship. An hour later, a small shuttle detached from the Consequence and flew toward the command station. Captain Webb had requested a face-to-face meeting. When the shuttle bay doors opened, Velrath was there waiting. She watched as a human male walked down the ramp. He was tall and lean, with dark skin and short gray hair. His face had the look of someone who had seen many battles, but his eyes were calm, almost gentle. Ambassador Velrath, he said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. It is good to meet you in person. Velrath did not take his hand. Captain Webb, I need you to tell me the truth. Can you really save my people? Webb lowered his hand. He looked at her for a long moment, and his expression became serious. I can, he said, but you will have to trust me. And I warn you, what you are about to see will change how you view humanity forever. We are not what you think we are. The fleets you have seen, the military exercises, the displays of power, those are what we show the galaxy. What we keep hidden is very different. Different how? Webb smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. You asked for a fleet, Ambassador. You expected thousands of ships. But here is something about humans that the galaxy has not learned yet. He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. When we send a fleet, it is because we want to be seen. When we send a single ship, that is when you should be afraid. He straightened up and walked past her, heading toward the command center. Now, he said over his shoulder, let me show you how we are going to kill 3 million bugs. Velrath stood there in the shuttle bay, her heart's beating fast. For the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope, but she also felt a strange new emotion, a creeping suspicion that humanity was far more terrifying than anyone had ever imagined. Captain Marcus Webb stood in the command center of the Karashi station, surrounded by alien officers who looked at him like he was insane. A massive holographic display floated in the air before them, showing the approaching swarm as a cloud of red dots moving slowly toward a single blue dot, the Karashi homeworld. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Thornax said, his voice dripping with doubt. "You want us to pull back our entire defensive fleet, you want us to leave our homeworld unprotected, and you want to fly your single ship directly into the middle of 3 million enemy drones." "That is correct," Webb said calmly. "You are insane." "Possibly, but I am also very good at my job." Velrath stepped forward. "Captain Webb, you promised to explain. We have given you our trust. Now please help us understand. What makes your ship so special? How can one vessel do what our entire fleet cannot?" Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. Instead of the swarm, it now showed his ship, the HSS Consequence, in perfect detail. "What I am about to tell you is classified at the highest level," he said. "Only a handful of humans know what I'm about to share. After today, you will understand why we kept it secret." He pointed at the ship on the display. "The Consequence is not a warship, not in the way you understand warships. We call it a collapse-class intervention vessel. There are only 12 of them in existence. They are not part of our regular Navy. They do not appear in any public records. As far as the galaxy knows, they do not exist." "What is their purpose?" Velrath asked. "To end wars before they become wars. To solve impossible problems. To do the things that fleets cannot do." Webb zoomed in on the ship's hull. "The Consequence has 3 things that make it different from any other vessel in the galaxy." He pointed at the engine section. "First, it has a blink drive, not a standard faster-than-light engine. A blink drive can make micro jumps of a few kilometers in less than a millisecond. The ship can appear and disappear dozens of times per second. No weapon can track it. No shield can stop something that is never in the same place twice." The Karashi officers exchanged glances. Such technology should not be possible. The energy requirements alone would be enormous. "Second," Webb continued, pointing at sections of the ship that had no visible weapons. "It carries weapons that are designed for very specific targets. We do not use brute force, we use precision. Every weapon on this ship was built to exploit a particular weakness. For your swarm, we will use resonance warheads." "Resonance warheads?" Thornax asked. "Your swarm is silicon-based. Their bodies, their ships, everything they build uses crystalline silicon structures. Crystals have a natural frequency at which they vibrate. If you hit them with the exact right frequency, at the exact right strength," Webb made an explosion gesture with his hands, "they shatter. From the inside." Velrath felt a chill run down her spine. "You can destroy their ships without even hitting them?" "We can destroy their ships by singing to them, if you want to think of it that way. A very deadly song." Webb smiled briefly, then became serious again. "But that leads to the third and most important thing. The Consequence is not just a ship, it is a mobile research and analysis platform. My crew is not made up of soldiers. They are specialists, scientists, engineers, xenobiologists, tactical experts. The 47 people on my ship know more about fighting the swarm than anyone in this room." He changed the display again, showing the internal structure of a swarm drone. "We have spent the last 3 days analyzing every piece of data you sent us. We now know exactly how the swarm thinks, how it moves, and how it dies." "And," Thornax asked impatiently, "and we found their weakness." Webb pointed at a specific part of the drone. "The Devourer swarm operates as a hive mind. Millions of drones, but only one intelligence controlling them all. That intelligence is not spread evenly. It is concentrated in special units called queen nodes." The display zoomed out, showing the swarm again. 14 dots among the millions were highlighted in yellow. 14 queen nodes," Webb said. "Each one controls a section of the swarm. Together, they coordinate the entire horde. If we destroy all 14 queen nodes, the swarm loses its mind. The drones will become feral. They will turn on each other. They will destroy themselves." Velrath stared at the display. But those queen nodes are in the middle of the swarm. They are protected by millions of drones. Yes, they are. How will you reach them? Webb's eyes met hers. That is what the consequence was built for, Ambassador. We will fly into the swarm. We will dance through their drones like a ghost. We will kill each queen node one by one, and when the last one dies, the swarm will tear itself apart. Silence filled the room. Admiral Thornax was the first to speak. His voice was no longer angry. It was something else, something like awe mixed with fear. If you have ships like this, if you have this technology, why do you even bother with regular fleets? Why show the galaxy thousands of warships when you have this? Webb turned to face the Admiral. Because the galaxy is not ready to know what we really are. Our fleets serve a purpose. They make other species feel safe. They make potential enemies think twice before attacking. They are a display, Admiral. A performance. And this, Thornax pointed at the image of the consequence. What is this? This is what happens when the performance ends. When the curtain falls. When someone threatens something we care about. Webb's voice became quiet and cold. Our fleets are what we show. The consequence is what we hide. It is not a weapon of war. It is a weapon of absolute certainty. Velrath understood then. She understood why the humans had sent only one ship. She understood why Director Chen had been so calm. The humans had not abandoned the Karashi. They had sent their best. They had sent something that was never meant to be seen, a secret weapon that could end threats before they became disasters. Why are you telling us this? She asked. Why reveal your secret? Webb looked at her with tired eyes. Because you need to trust me for this to work, and because after today, you will never look at humanity the same way again. We could not hide it from you even if we wanted to. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at the assembled officers. Prepare your people, Ambassador. In 6 days, we will intercept the swarm before it reaches your homeworld. Your fleet should stay back and protect the planet in case any drones get through. But they probably will not. You sound very confident, Thornax said. Webb nodded slowly. The consequence has been deployed 31 times, Admiral. Do you know how many times it has failed? No one answered. 0. Webb stepped through the door and disappeared into the corridor. His voice echoed back to them. 0. Velrath stood there for a long time after he left, staring at the holographic display. The red cloud of the swarm seemed less frightening now, not because it was smaller, but because she had seen something even more terrifying. She had seen what humanity kept hidden in the dark, and for the first time in her life, she was glad that humans were her allies and not her enemies. The swarm arrived on the 6th day. Velrath watched from the observation deck as the stars began to disappear. One by one, the points of light on the horizon were swallowed by darkness. It was not a cloud. It was not a shadow. It was a living wall of death stretching across the sky. 3.4 million drone ships. The number had grown since their last scan. The Karashi fleet, 8,000 vessels carrying the last hope of their civilization, held position near the homeworld. They had followed Captain Webb's instructions. They would not engage unless drones broke through. Far ahead of them, a single point of light moved toward the approaching darkness. The consequence. All stations, this is Captain Webb. The human's voice came through every speaker in the command center. We are beginning our approach. Estimated time to first Queen node, 17 minutes. Keep your channels open. You are going to want to watch this. Admiral Thornax stood beside Velrath, his arms crossed. He sounds like he is about to take a casual walk through a garden. Perhaps to him, this is casual, Velrath replied. On the display screen, the consequence accelerated toward the swarm. The wall of enemy ships grew larger and larger until it filled the entire view. From this distance, the individual drones were visible. Ugly things made of black metal and crystal, shaped like insects with too many legs. And then the consequence entered the swarm. For a moment, Velrath was certain she would see an explosion. Surely no ship could survive flying into that mass of enemies. Surely the drones would tear it apart in seconds. But the explosion never came. Instead, something impossible happened. The consequence flickered. That was the only word for it. The ship was there, and then it was not. 1,000 drone ships fired at the spot where it had been, their weapons tearing through empty space. Half a heartbeat later, the Consequence reappeared 3 kilometers to the left. It was there for barely an instant before it flickered again, reappearing somewhere else entirely. It was dancing. The ship was dancing through the swarm like a ghost. Blink drive engaged, Webb's voice came through calmly. First volley launching now. Bright lines of light shot from the Consequence. Missiles moving faster than anything the Karashi had ever seen. They did not fly toward the drones around them. They flew deeper into the swarm, towards something hidden in the center. The first Queen node. The missiles struck their target. There was no explosion, at least not a normal one. Instead, a wave of energy spread outward from the impact point. It was invisible to the naked eye, but the effect was immediate. Thousands of drone ships simply fell apart. It was as if they had been made of sand and someone had blown them away. Their hulls cracked. Their crystal structures shattered. They broke into millions of pieces that floated away like dust in the wind. First Queen node destroyed, Webb announced. Enemy casualties, approximately 40,000. 13 to go. The Karashi command center erupted in shocked voices. 40,000 enemies killed in a single strike, and the human ship had not even been hit. But the swarm was not stupid. It was learning. The drones began to move differently. Instead of chasing the Consequence, they spread out and tried to predict where it would appear next. They filled the space with weapons fire, creating walls of death that the ship would have to fly through. The Consequence adapted. Its movements became even more erratic. It no longer just flickered. It spun and twisted, changing direction in ways that should have been impossible. Sometimes it seemed to be in 2 places at once, leaving after images that confused the enemy sensors. They are trying to corner me, Webb said. There was no fear in his voice, only concentration. Adjusting pattern, second Queen node in range. Another volley of resonance missiles, another wave of destruction, 60,000 drones shattered like glass. 12 to go. The battle continued for hours. Velreth lost track of time. She could not look away from the screen. Every time the Consequence flickered, every time another Queen node died, she felt her hearts pound faster. The swarm fought back with everything it had. Millions of drones converged on the tiny human ship, throwing themselves at it in suicidal waves. They fired weapons that turned space itself into fire. They used their own bodies as shields, trying to block the missiles. None of it worked. The Consequence moved through them like water through rocks. It was never where they expected. It hit them where they were weak. It disappeared when they attacked and reappeared when they were vulnerable. Queen node 7 destroyed. 7 remaining. Queen node 8 destroyed. 6 remaining. Queen node 9 destroyed. 5 remaining. With each announcement, the swarm became more chaotic. The coordination between drones started to break down. Some drones stopped moving entirely. Others began flying in circles, confused by the loss of their guiding intelligence. They are losing cohesion, Admiral Thornax said, his voice filled with wonder. He is actually doing it. Queen node 12 destroyed. 2 remaining. The swarm was now in complete disorder. Drones crashed into each other. Groups of them turned and attacked their own allies. The hive mind was fragmenting, and the pieces were tearing each other apart. But the remaining 2 Queen nodes had hidden themselves well. They were deep in the thickest part of the swarm, protected by millions of drones that had formed a living wall around them. For the first time, Webb's voice showed a hint of strain. Final 2 targets are heavily defended. This is going to be close. The Consequence dove deeper into the chaos. The blink drive was working at maximum power now, jumping the ship every fraction of a second. The view on the screen became a blur of light and darkness as the ship fought its way toward the last queens. "Come on," Velrath whispered. She did not realize she was gripping the railing so hard that her fingers hurt. "Come on!" A massive drone, larger than any they had seen before, appeared in the Consequence's path. It was a Guardian, a special unit designed to protect the Queen nodes. Its weapons charged with blinding light. The Consequence did not slow down. It flickered directly through the Guardian's position, appearing on the other side before the creature could fire. A resonance missile hit the Guardian from behind, and it exploded into crystal fragments. Queen node 13 destroyed. One remaining. The last queen node tried to run. It began moving away from the battle, pushing through its own drones in a desperate attempt to escape. But it was too slow. Far too slow. The consequence appeared directly in front of it. For one long moment, nothing happened. The queen node floated there, a massive creature of silicon and hate facing the tiny human ship that had destroyed its entire swarm. Then Webb spoke one final time. Target locked, firing. The final missile launched. The resonance wave expanded outward. The last queen node shattered, and 3.4 million drones went insane. It was like watching a sea of madness. The drones turned on each other with mindless fury, tearing themselves apart in a frenzy of destruction. Without the queen nodes to control them, they had become nothing but machines of violence with no direction. They killed and killed until there was nothing left to kill. The consequence floated in the middle of the carnage, untouched. Its hull did not have a single scratch. Webb's voice came through the speakers, calm and quiet. All queen nodes destroyed, swarm neutralized, threat eliminated. The command center was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Admiral Thornax fell to his knees. Impossible, he whispered. Impossible. But it was not impossible. It had happened. They had all watched it happen. A single human ship had destroyed 3.4 million enemies in 11 hours. It had danced through an army of death and killed their gods one by one. Velrath felt tears running down her face. Her people were saved. Her homeworld would survive. And all because of one ship, one small, dark ship with a crew of 47 humans. On the screen, the consequence began its slow journey back toward the Karashi fleet. Behind it, the remains of the Devourer swarm destroyed themselves in a final act of mindless rage. The war was over before it had truly begun. The observation deck was quiet now. 2 days had passed since the battle. The last of the swarm drones had finished destroying each other, leaving only a field of broken crystal floating in the void. Already, Karashi salvage ships were moving through the debris, collecting materials that would help rebuild the colonies that had been lost. Ambassador Velrath stood at the great window, watching the salvage operation. The stars were visible again, bright and clear. The darkness was gone. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Captain Webb walking across the deck. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his movements were slower than before. Even for humans, even with their secret technology, 11 hours of battle had taken a toll. Captain, she said softly, I did not expect to see you before you left. Webb stopped beside her and looked out at the stars. I wanted to say goodbye properly. We will be departing within the hour. So soon? We are needed elsewhere. There is always somewhere else. He paused and let out a long breath. That is the nature of our work. Velrath nodded slowly. She had many questions, more questions than she could count, but one stood above all the others. Captain Webb, I have to ask, why did you really send only one ship? Webb was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Ambassador, do you know what most species do when they face a threat? They gather their forces, they call their allies, they build the biggest army they can and throw it at the enemy. He turned to look at her. That works sometimes, but it is slow. By the time you have gathered your fleet, millions more could be dead. Cities could be burned. Worlds could be lost. So you chose speed over numbers. We chose precision over force. Webb looked back at the window. The consequence was built on a simple idea, that wars are won not by who has the most soldiers, but by who understands the enemy best. If you know exactly where to hit, exactly when to hit, and exactly how to hit, you do not need an army, you need a scalpel. Velrath considered this. But surely there are threats that even your ship cannot handle alone. Of course. There are enemies so vast and so powerful that even the consequence would fail. But those enemies are rare. Webb smiled slightly. For most problems, one ship is enough. For the truly impossible ones, we send two. She could not tell if he was joking. What will happen now, she asked. The galaxy will learn what you did here. They will learn about your hidden ships, your secret technology. They will fear you more than they already do. Webb nodded slowly. Some will fear us. That is unavoidable. But I hope that most will understand what we actually showed them today. And what is that? That we are not conquerors, we are not empire builders, we do not want to rule the galaxy or dominate other species? He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were sincere. We want to protect. That is what the consequence means, Ambassador. It is not a weapon of aggression, it is a promise. A promise that if something threatens the people we care about, we will stop it, no matter what it takes. Velreth felt something warm in her chest. You care about the Karashi. We care about everyone who asks for our help. That is who we are. Webb's expression became serious. Humanity has learned hard lessons about war. We have seen what happens when good people do nothing. We have seen what happens when the strong ignore the weak. We will not make those mistakes again. They stood together in silence for a long moment, watching the stars. Finally, Velreth spoke again. I owe you an apology, Captain. For what? When I saw your ship arrive, when I saw that it was alone, I thought you had abandoned us. I thought humanity did not care. She lowered her head. I was wrong. I was so very wrong. Webb reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a gentle gesture, surprisingly warm for a warrior. You were afraid, he said. Fear makes us see threats everywhere, even where there are none. You do not need to apologize for being afraid. What matters is what you do after the fear passes. Velreth looked up at him. And what should I do now? Tell your people what happened here. Tell the galaxy what you saw. Webb's grip tightened slightly, then released. But also tell them something else. Tell them that humanity does not want to be feared. We want to be trusted. We want to be partners. We want to stand beside other species, not above them. Some will not believe that. Then we will prove it, over and over, as many times as it takes. He stepped back and straightened his uniform. Now I really must go. My crew needs rest, and there is a situation developing in the outer reaches that may require our attention. Velreth watched him walk toward the door. Before he reached it, she called out one more question. Captain Webb, the name of your ship, the consequence. What does it truly mean? He stopped at the door and looked back at her. There was something ancient in his eyes, something that had seen too much and lived too long. It means that actions have outcomes, Ambassador. Choices have results. When someone threatens innocent lives, there are consequences for that choice. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The devourer swarm chose to attack your people. They chose to kill billions of innocent beings, and so they face the consequence of that choice. Us. He smiled one last time, a tired, sad smile. We are not a threat, Ambassador. We are not a weapon. We are simply the result, the natural outcome of a galaxy where humanity has decided that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. And with that, he was gone. An hour later, Velreth watched the consequence depart. The small dark ship powered up its engines, turned toward the distant stars, and vanished in a flash of light. Behind it, the Karashi homeworld continued to spin peacefully in the void. Children played in streets that would never burn. Families lived in homes that would never be destroyed. A civilization of billions continued its existence, unaware of how close they had come to extinction. All because of one ship, 47 humans, and a promise. Velreth turned away from the window and walked back into the station. She had work to do. Reports to write, stories to tell. The galaxy needed to know what had happened here. They needed to understand what humanity really was. Not the fleets they showed, not the power they displayed, but the quiet determination that lay beneath. They needed to know that when everything seemed lost, when hope had died and the darkness was closing in, there was a species that would come to help. Not for glory, not for conquest, not for power, simply because it was the right thing to do. And they needed to know one more thing. The most important thing of all. When humanity sent a fleet, it was a message, a display of strength meant to impress and warn. But when humanity sent a single ship, that was when the real help arrived. That was when the consequence came. And for those who threatened the innocent, that was something to be very, very afraid of. Far away in the cold space between stars, the HSS Consequence continued its journey. Captain Webb sat in his command chair, watching the stars stream past. His crew rested in their quarters, recovering from the battle. In a few days, they would arrive at their next destination. Another threat, another impossible situation, another chance to do what they did best. He closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of peace. Then he opened them again and got back to work. There was always more work to do.